I had just turned 66 when something unexpected happened. I won the lottery, $20 million. It felt surreal. For a few seconds, I thought it might be a mistake or a dream I'd soon wake from. But it was real. After taxes, I would still have more than 10 million. I smiled to myself, thinking, this will change everything, but not for me. I wasn't thinking of buying a yacht or traveling the world. No. I thought about my son, Noah, and my daughter, Eliza. I thought about how hard life had been for them. How many times I'd said no to myself so I could say yes to them. So I made a plan. I'd buy each of them a home, no mortgage, no debt. I would also write each of them a check for $1 million, a gift, a new beginning, and I'd give it all to them on my birthday. They were supposed to come that night. I had cooked all their favorite dishes, spicy curry for Noah, sweet and sour tofu for Eliza, and a healthy little kid's meal for my granddaughter, Maya. I'd spent 2 days preparing everything. The house smelled of warm spices and rosemary and home, but by 10 p.m. I was still sitting at the dining table. Alone. Eliza had called earlier in the day saying she might be late due to work. Noah texted saying he had a project emergency. I told them that's okay, work comes first. But midnight came, and still no one. I wrapped the food, tucked the 2 house contracts and $1 million checks into my nightstand drawer and went to bed. My heart was heavy, but I told myself they'll come tomorrow. They must. They didn't. The next morning I sent a message in our family group chat. It's Saturday, come for dinner, I have a surprise for you. No one replied. I went for a walk. My neighbor Grace saw me and said, you're usually out early, what happened? I smiled weakly, too embarrassed to say I'd stayed up crying alone. Then she said something that made me stop in my tracks. You always do so much for your kids, but do you ever do anything for yourself? I didn't answer because the truth was no, I never had. Before I could respond, another voice cut in, cold, mocking. It was Sylvia, an old colleague I never got along with. Still pretending to be the perfect mother, she said. Well, last night I saw something that might interest you. I wanted to walk away, but she shoved her phone in my hand. It was a video. There they were, my children, dressed up, smiling, laughing at a lavish restaurant, toasting, standing beside their father, my ex-husband, and a woman in a red dress. Her name was Corrine, the woman who once helped tear our family apart. The video banner read, Happy 25th anniversary, Daniel and Corrine. Happy birthday, Corrine. My granddaughter was in the video too, tugging on Corrine's hand. You're the best grandma, she squealed. Can you and Grandpa come to my school sports day? I couldn't breathe. Sylvia whispered like venom, your son gave her a $10,000 bracelet. Your daughter bought her a full set of gold jewelry. And you, what did you get? Nothing. I walked home, legs shaking. I didn't cry, not yet, but my heart cracked open that day. And all the memories began flooding back, the life I'd buried for decades. My name is Margaret. I was 24 when I married Daniel. Back then, everyone said I was lucky. He had a good job at the city planning office. I was just a part-time proofreader, but the truth came out too late. Daniel had never loved me. His heart had always belonged to someone else, to Corrine. He married me because it was convenient, stable, respectable. A year later, I gave birth to twins, 2 fragile little souls who became my world. I was overwhelmed, exhausted. I begged for help, but Daniel said his mother was too busy. Only years later did I learn the truth. His mother had become a full-time nanny for Corrine's daughter. He sent his mother to care for another woman's child while I was alone with 2 screaming babies and no income. I should have left then, but I stayed. I stayed for Noah and Eliza. I told myself love would grow. It didn't. One day I found the letters. They had written to each other for over a decade, love letters filled with longing and bitterness. Corrine called me names, said I looked like a cow after giving birth, said her dog had more grace than I did. And Daniel, he sent her money every month, money I needed to feed our children. The night I confronted him, he said coldly, they're just letters. If it bothers you, I'll stop. He didn't. The next day there was no formula for the babies. He had forgotten, again. I stormed into his study and found him gazing at Corrine's photo, with more love in his eyes than he had ever shown me. When I ripped the photo, he shoved me, hard. I hit the corner of the desk. Pain shot through my back. I called the police, then the news. I told the world what he'd done. He lost everything, his job, his promotion, his respect. And only then did he agree to a divorce. But he demanded to keep our son. I let him. I took Eliza and walked away. I worked endlessly. I built a new life, learned French, became the director of European trade at a fashion firm. I sent Eliza to private school, paid for Noah's home, supported them through everything. And yet they chose her, they chose Corrine on my birthday. I stood in the kitchen staring at the cake I had made. I realized this wasn't the first time I had been abandoned, but it would be the last. I sold the house under Noah's name, cut Eliza off financially, donated my assets to charity. Then I bought myself a little villa, filled it with books and cats, and opened a cozy cafe library. People came, not for coffee, but for the feeling, the warmth, the peace. One day, Eliza came back, pregnant, bruised, crying. "Mom," she said, "he cheated, he hit me." I stared at her, the same daughter who once said I ruined her life. Now she wanted comfort. I looked at her and said gently, "You left me a long time ago. Now it's your turn to stand up." She sobbed, but I didn't reach out, not because I didn't love her, but because I finally loved myself more. She texted me sometimes. Messages like, "I understand now, I'm sorry." I read them, every single one, but I never replied. Because sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones we survive, not erase. And maybe, just maybe, that survival is enough. My cafe flourished. Young people came to study, dream, fall in love. I watched them with quiet joy. I wasn't lonely, not anymore, because I had found what I had spent a lifetime searching for. Not love, not validation, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop trying to be loved by those who can't see you and start loving yourself enough to walk away. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was free. The days in the villa passed gently. The sun came in through the east windows every morning, painting the hardwood floors golden. My cats, Oliver and Clementine, took turns curling in my lap as I read. Sometimes I watered the garden barefoot. The soil was soft, almost like warm cake batter. There was something about planting seeds and watching them bloom that felt like rewriting my life from the roots. I no longer asked if anyone would come. I no longer waited. And then one afternoon there was a knock at the door. It was the police. "Ma'am," one of them said kindly, "your children reported you missing." Missing, they hadn't called me in months, they hadn't visited, but now they were concerned. I nodded, thanked them, and gently closed the door. An hour later, Noah and Eliza showed up in my garden, and with them, a face I hadn't seen in decades. My older brother, Edward. He hadn't spoken to me since the day I divorced Daniel. Back then, he called me selfish, ungrateful, a disgrace to the family. Now he stood under my fig tree, pretending none of that ever happened. "I heard you were doing well," he said, eyes darting over the villa. "This place is nice, must pay well to be a housekeeper, huh?" I said nothing. Eliza stepped forward. "Mom, we know we made mistakes. But it's time to move on, don't you think?" She wanted her wedding gift, the $100,000 I once promised. "Ask your mother," I said calmly. "You already chose her." Noah stayed quiet. But when he spoke, his voice carried anger, not regret. "You're really going to sue me over the house after everything we've been through?" I looked at him, really looked, and realized he had aged. Deep lines ran across his forehead. His shirt was wrinkled, the fire in his eyes had turned to smoke. "Eliza's right," he muttered. "No wonder Dad left you." I nodded slowly, then go to him, ask him for help. They left furious. Edward stayed back, trying his luck. "Mom's sick," he said. "She wants you to come home, take care of Dad." He fell. I stared at him, this man who once cheered when I was kicked out. "You were their golden child," I said. "They gave you everything. And now you want to hand him to me." "Legally," he said with a sly grin, "you're still responsible." "Then sue me," I said, "but I won't lift a finger." I called security, and just like that they were gone. Weeks passed. Then one evening the phone rang. A voice I hadn't heard in years rasped through the line. "Belle," my father whispered, I'm sorry." His breath was ragged, his tone filled with something I had waited a lifetime to hear, regret, but it was too late. I hung up, still something tugged at me, so I went. He was thin, pale, his eyes were yellowed, sunken. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. 10 minutes later he died, not with peace, not with dignity, but with tears on his face, 2 wet lines trailing from the corners of his closed eyes. My mother chased me into the hallway, begging me to stay, but I gave her a check for the funeral and walked away. She had never protected me. Never spoken up, not once. Some silences cut deeper than words. I returned to my cafe. It was thriving. Students studied by the window. Young mothers came in with strollers. travelers rested with coffee-stained novels. I poured myself a cappuccino and sat by the window, watching, living. Not long after, Eliza came back again, heavily pregnant. She didn't say much, just sat across from me and held the warm cup I gave her. "I made a mistake," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she told me her story, how the man she trusted had cheated, how he had raised his hands in anger, how he had left her pregnant and broken. Tears streamed down her face. "Mom, please," she begged, "don't abandon me." But I didn't lean forward, I didn't touch her. Instead, I said, "You left me long before I left you. This isn't a home you return to when the world gets cold. You have to build your own now." She sobbed but nodded, and I saw for the first time not a daughter, not a child, but a woman. Maybe pain had finally taught her what comfort never could. Noah never returned. But through whispers and news, I heard pieces. His marriage had ended, his girlfriend left, and now he was caring for Daniel. Yes, the man who once chose another woman, another life, had suffered a stroke, paralysis, speech gone. Corrine left him, packed her bags, and vanished. Noah had to bathe him, feed him, change his linens. Life has a way of bringing us face to face with the people we once judged, the choices we once didn't understand. Maybe now he'd understand mine. Time passed. The cafe grew. I adopted more cats. People began leaving notes by the register, small poems, thank you messages, drawings of flowers and stars. I kept everyone. Not because I needed praise, but because they reminded me I existed, I mattered. Even if it wasn't to my family, one message stayed with me. It read, "Your place feels like hope." And I smiled, because that's exactly what I had built. Not a cafe, but a home for anyone who ever felt unseen, unheard, unloved. A place where the past was heavy but the coffee was warm, where healing was slow but possible, where silence didn't mean absence. And solitude didn't mean sorrow. My name is Margaret. I was once a daughter, a wife, a mother, forgotten. But now I am simply me, alive, free, and at peace. I didn't cry again after that night. Some grief is so deep it empties you. Like a flood that takes everything and leaves only silence. But in that silence, I found something I never expected. Clarity. I took a deep breath. For the first time, I felt no need to explain myself, no desire to be understood. My love had been loud for decades. I had shouted it in the form of sacrifices, meals cooked, bills paid, sleepless nights, and whispered lullabies. Now my love would be quiet, directed inward. The next morning, I went to a law office and drafted a new will. Everything I owned, my pension, savings, investments, would go to charity, to shelters for women starting over, to schools in need, to young girls who deserved a future. I also called my lawyer and put my son's house on the market. It was still in my name. I had let them live there rent-free for years. Now I asked the agent to list it with urgency. Then I canceled my lease on the apartment I had rented for Eliza and told the landlord not to send me any more invoices. When the agent asked if I wanted to schedule a tour for the luxury villa I'd once considered buying for them, I smiled and said, "No, thank you, I'm not buying for anyone else anymore." And just like that, the old Margaret, the mother who gave everything and asked for nothing, was gone. I bought a cozy house for myself. Just big enough for my books, my cats, and my new life. There was a small backyard where sunlight danced every morning. I planted wildflowers and herbs, rosemary, lavender, mint. Every time I stepped outside, the air smelled like freedom. Then I opened my dream cafe, a quiet space, wooden shelves filled with novels and poetry, coffee so warm it felt like a hug, power outlets at every table, a children's corner with illustrated storybooks. I hired young people who needed work, students, single mothers, people with disabilities. I paid them fairly, treated them with kindness, and the cafe bloomed, not in riches but in something deeper. People came not just for drinks but for peace, to breathe, to read, to remember who they were. I wasn't just building a business. I was building sanctuary. Of course, peace doesn't last long when people think they still own parts of you. It started with phone calls. Noah furious, "Mom, are you out of your mind? You're selling the house." Yes, I was. He wasn't asking, he was accusing, demanding, as if the years I spent building his life were still not enough. "You're punishing us over a birthday," he snapped. "No wonder Dad left you." I laughed quietly. "Then maybe Dad can buy you another house." I hung up, then came Eliza. "Mom," she said sharply, "you promised me a wedding gift." $100,000. I need it now, the house needs renovations. Her voice was tight, almost trembling with entitlement. I looked her in the eyes. Ask the woman you call mother, the one you chose. She stared at me, then exploded. We were giving you a chance to fix things. You think I actually want to be here? She hurled words at me like knives, that I was cold, that I ruined her childhood, that I was bitter, that Corrine was a better mother than I ever was. I didn't flinch, I let her speak. Because for the first time, I knew her words were about her, not me. When she finally left, she shouted, "Don't come crawling back to us when you're old and alone." But I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was already alone when I raised them. This was just quieter. A few weeks later, my brother Edward returned. He stood in my garden, hands shoved in his coat pockets, pretending to look concerned. "Our parents, they're getting old," he said. "Dad's health is failing. We thought maybe it's time you came home." I stared at him, the same man who once told me I was an embarrassment. "I'm not the caregiver of the people who exiled me," I said. "But they're your parents," he insisted. "They gave you everything." I laughed. "No, they gave you everything. They gave me silence." He sighed and tried one last trick. "I spoke to a lawyer. You're still legally obligated to help care for them." "Then go ahead," I said. "Take me to court." He didn't, of course he didn't. He was too lazy for that. Eventually, he dumped our parents into a rundown nursing home and told the staff, "Just make sure they don't die." I didn't call, I didn't visit, but I didn't celebrate either. I simply kept living. Months passed. One evening, I was behind the cafe counter pouring a drink when I saw her. Michelle, Noah's ex-wife. She looked thinner, worn down. She was holding hands with a man I didn't recognize. The moment she saw me, she dropped his hand. "We're getting divorced," she said softly. "Noah's been seeing someone else." A woman Corrine introduced him to. I didn't respond, I simply nodded. Their stories didn't belong to me anymore. Eliza got married, she didn't invite me. A friend sent me a video of the ceremony. Corrine was sitting in the seat meant for the mother of the bride. My friend messaged, "Why is she in your place?" I replied, "Because I no longer belong in that story." And that night I slept peacefully. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it no longer mattered. The cafe became a local gem. Influencers shared about it. Students came every day. I launched themed drinks each month, Golden Fortune Latte in January, Sweetheart Mocha in February. People laughed here, shared first dates here, found themselves here. I hired more staff, raised their salaries, I watched them grow. The space I once dreamed of had become a home for so many. But most importantly, it had become a home for me. I was no longer someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's daughter. I was Margaret, and for once that was enough. It was late autumn when I received the call. A number I didn't recognize lit up my screen. I let it ring, but something in me, some ache I couldn't name, made me answer. The voice was fragile, slurred. "Belle." I froze. No one had called me that in years. It was my father. He said he didn't have much time, that there were things he wanted to say, things he should have said long ago. I stood by the window, listening to his labored breathing on the other end. But the words, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I see now what I didn't then," none of them touched me, because apologies at the edge of death don't erase a lifetime of silence. I didn't reply, but I went, not for him, but for myself. When I stepped into the room, he looked small, withered. A man I once feared now looked like a shadow of himself. He opened his eyes, they flickered toward me. He tried to speak. No words came. He died 10 minutes later. Not with dignity, but with 2 tears sliding down his cheeks, soft, slow, too late. As I turned to leave, my mother reached out to me in the hallway. She was old now, fragile, her voice trembling, but I felt nothing. All my life she had watched, and never once stood between me and cruelty. She hadn't been evil, she had simply been absent. "I need help," she whispered. I gave her a check for $10,000. "For the funeral," I said. "I won't be attending." Then I turned and walked away. She wept behind me, soft, thin sobs that echoed down the corridor. But I didn't turn back, because I had spent my whole life turning back, and it had cost me everything. Back at the cafe, life went on. People sipped tea by the windows. Cats napped on armchairs. I poured cappuccinos with cinnamon hearts on top. There was peace in repetition. But healing, I learned, doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it just feels like finally breathing normally. Until one day. She returned. Eliza, she was different. Tired, pale, her belly round with child, her hands trembling, a bruise along her hairline. She ordered an iced Americano. I gave her warm water instead. She didn't complain. We sat across from each other in silence. Then she broke. Mom, he cheated. He was living with her the whole time I was pregnant. Last week I caught them together. I pushed her. He hit me. Her voice cracked. She shook. For a moment I saw myself in her, not the daughter I raised, but the woman I once was, bent over the kitchen counter, breathless from heartbreak, body bruised, soul torn. I think I made a mistake, she whispered. I took a slow sip of my coffee, let the silence sit between us. Then I said calmly, "Did you tell your father?" Her eyes widened. "You said he had connections. Maybe he can help." "Mom," she said, trembling, "you're really leaving me like this." I looked at her, not with cruelty, but with clarity. "You left me first, Eliza. You called another woman mother in front of me. You said I ruined your life. You threw my love away. This place, this life, it isn't a recycling bin. You don't get to come back just because life got hard." She cried then, gasping, breaking. "I don't know what to do." I stood. My voice was soft but steady. "Then start by leaving him. Don't wait for someone to rescue you. Rescue yourself." She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks, and I knew she heard me truly for the first time. She didn't come back for a long time after that, but every few months she sent a text. "I'm sorry, Mom. I understand now. You must have been so tired all those years. I hope you're doing okay." I never replied. Not because I hated her, but because some things like trust, like love, can't be rebuilt with words alone. They require time, growth, a change in the very soul. Years passed. I adopted more cats, added more books, grew vines on the garden wall. The young people who worked at the cafe often stayed late. They shared stories with me, their heartbreaks, their dreams, their poems scribbled in worn journals. They called me Miss Margaret. Or just M. And I loved them, not as a mother, but as a witness to their unfolding. They never asked for more than I could give, and they never took what I didn't offer. One day, I heard from an old friend. She told me Daniel had suffered a stroke. Severe. Corrine, after a few months of caring for him, had left, packed up, drained the joint account. He had become a burden, and she hadn't signed up for that. Noah took him in. But he was already drowning. After his divorce and financial ruin, there wasn't much left. His new relationship had ended too. The woman left when she realized he had nothing to offer. Now he was stuck, feeding his father, changing him, managing a pile of unpaid bills. And for the first time in his life, he had no one to lean on. I didn't feel joy, only stillness. Life teaches gently, and when that fails, it teaches through pain. Eliza, I heard, had moved to another city with her child. She found a job, worked long hours, rented a small apartment. She didn't remarry, she started over. And sometimes, late at night, I imagined her walking home, baby in one arm, groceries in the other, remembering me, not as the bitter mother she once accused, but as the woman who had done it all, and somehow survived. The last message she sent said, "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness, but I think I finally understand what strength really looks like. You were never weak, you were never selfish, you were just alone, and still you loved us. Thank you." I didn't reply, but I smiled, because I knew some seeds don't bloom right away, but one day they do, and when they do, they remember the soil that held them. I stood by the cafe window that evening, the light fading. A mug of chai in my hands, my cat stretched across the shelf beside me, the door chimed softly. A young couple walked in, their child toddling between them. A new chapter, a new generation. And I stood quietly, not watching them, but witnessing myself. All the versions of me that had once cried, begged, loved too hard, now resting, now healed, now whole. Spring returned quietly that year. The cafe garden bloomed early. Tiny white blossoms curled along the fences and bees hovered over mint leaves. The wind smelled of something soft like change, but without sorrow. I was sitting at the corner table by the bookshelf, organizing bookmarks one morning when a young girl tapped the counter. She couldn't have been older than 10. "My mom says this place used to belong to someone sad," she said, "but now it's the happiest place she knows." I smiled. "I think your mom's right," I said, "but it was never sadness that built this place. It was love, just the kind that needed time to find its way back." One evening, when the shop had closed and the stars pressed gently against the window panes, I pulled out a box. Inside were old things. A photo of me holding the twins on their first birthday. A postcard Eliza once drew in crayons. A poem Noah wrote in 4th grade. They weren't souvenirs, they were proof. Proof that I had loved with everything I had. Even when no one noticed, even when no one stayed, I didn't cry, I just held them like memories in the palm of my hand, then I put the lid back on and let them rest. People often ask me now, do you ever feel lonely? And the truth is, yes, sometimes, but it's not the kind of loneliness that hurts. It's the kind that reminds me I belong to myself. I wake up when I want. I drink my coffee slowly. I talk to my cats like they understand every word. And every day, someone walks into the cafe needing what I once needed: kindness without strings, warmth without performance, space to be exactly who they are. And I give that to them, not because I have to, but because I can. Because I choose to, and there is power in that, more than I ever found in being a wife, a daughter, a mother. One rainy afternoon, a woman I didn't recognize came in with a little boy. She ordered a lemon ginger tea and sat quietly by the window. The boy played in the children's corner, giggling. When I brought over the tea, she looked up. "Thank you," she said. "I read about this place online. People say it has magic in the walls." I smiled. "They're probably just tasting the cinnamon." She laughed, and something about the way she cradled her mug reminded me of a version of myself I no longer was. Tired, but trying, scared, but still showing up. Before she left, she turned to me and said, "It's peaceful here, like nothing bad ever happened." I looked around, the twinkle lights, the book spines, the sleepy cat curled by the door, and I nodded. "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what it is." Sometimes when I walk through the aisles of my little cafe, I whisper quietly, "You did good, Margaret. You made it." Not because anyone needs to hear it, but because I do. I, who once loved so loudly that I forgot to leave space for myself. I, who once begged to be chosen by the people who could never see me. I, who gave everything and now give only what I want to. There is a kind of freedom that doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, in the form of a soft breeze, a quiet morning, a moment when you realize you are no longer waiting, no longer aching, no longer asking. Just living, just being, and that is enough. Always has been, always will be.